Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome New York Times Editorial Director of Live Journalism, Adam Bryant.
Good evening, everyone. We are thrilled that you've joined us at our annual Higher Ed Leaders Forum, and we couldn't be more excited about the program. We built the agenda from the ground up with a deep appreciation of and respect for all the challenges you deal with every day. And we know there are a lot of them, as the colleges and universities you run are microcosms and flashpoints of all the issues roiling society these days. I've interviewed more than 500 leaders for my weekly Corner Office series, including many university and college presidents, and I can honestly say that I think you have one of the toughest leadership roles on the planet, given that you have so many different constituents, all of whom are demanding 100% of your attention at all times. We promise you a healthy mix of big picture discussions along with pragmatic solutions and presentations, including a few of our Campus Matters talks tomorrow to help you do your jobs better every day. And you are a powerful audience, so we have built in lots of opportunities for you to get to know each other better, including in our Give and Get breakout sessions tomorrow afternoon. I'd like to take a moment to thank Workday and the Carnegie Corporation of New York for sponsoring this forum. We appreciate their support. And before we get started, a quick housekeeping note. We have found the best way to convey questions to the panelists is by emailing them to us at q@nytimes.com. You can include your name and institution, or if you prefer candor, if you wish to remain anonymous, just leave those off. We'll also be taking questions from Facebook Live during a couple of our sessions. So let's get started. Please join me in welcoming Dean Baquet, the executive editor of the New York Times, and Dr. Amy Gutmann, president of the University of Pennsylvania, who will be led by our media columnist, Jim Rutenberg, in a discussion about education in the post-truth era. And again, thank you for coming.
Hello, thanks for coming. We are so delighted to have you all here and to have our special guest, Dr. Gutmann, and to have Dean Baquet, my boss. It's always fun to interview the boss. And I was asking Amy on the way here how many degrees she had. Do you have an answer?
Enough.
Okay, because we have not, because neither Dean
none.
nor I don't have, neither of us has a degree. We're both are college dropouts, so we would like to borrow a couple of yours.
You're welcome. You're welcome to some.
So, the topic is the education in the post-truth era, and it's mind-boggling to me as a media columnist here how many conferences I'm going to like this, and we still haven't figured it out.
Yeah.
It's just insane. And I'm wondering, from both of your perspectives, is this like a post-truth crisis? Is this a crisis, or is this noise? How much is panic, and how much is this a real severe problem?
You go first.
So it's not a moment. If it is a moment, it's longer than most of our students' lifetimes. It is not, it didn't just come up in the last election. It's been a long growing trend, and it's an extremely serious problem. I would not call it post-truth as an era any more than I would call our era post-racial or the end of history. But make no mistake about it, the trend threatens not only our institutions, journalism and education, but it threatens the very fabric of democracy. And it's not exaggeration to say, if let unresponded to, it would threaten the very basis of civilization.
Right, so it's growing and just getting worse.
I actually think I actually think it's always been there. I thought as a journalist, my first exposure to this moment was during the Vince Foster. I don't know if those of you remember the suicide of Vince Foster, which for which there were just many made-up stories about. But because social media had not developed to the point where it is now, it largely remained a story in Washington and New York and among the media. If you can imagine the Vince Foster story today, it would, to be blunt, it would be on Fox and Friends. They would not have checked it out. They would just use it. It would just be, so I think it's been with us, but I think the rise of social media, which of course is one of the greatest things that happened to society, has also provided a forum to exaggerate and for lies too. But I agree that it's a dramatically threatening moment for the media and for academia.
Right, because I know that when I first covered politics at this newspaper, or my first presidential campaign was 2004, and Penn, you guys, factcheck.org was launching at Penn, which was a fact-checking website, and I don't know if it was before PolitiFact, but it was right there with it. So it was clearly an issue in 2004, but you could sort of, as journalistically, right, we could address a false narrative, and maybe just addressing it was a mistake because you were going to raise it up and people were going to notice it, and now it's everywhere.
No, it's not a mistake to address it. And the social media has run with false facts, but it's also a means of combating them quickly. So let me give you a pre-social media viral falsity that has claimed more lives than we have counted, which is a fraudulent article in Lancet connecting autism to vaccines. And that was published in 1998, and it took until 2010 for it to be retracted. In that period, so much damage has been done that, this spring in Minnesota, there have been dozens of children coming down with measles, a disease that otherwise would have been eradicated in the United States. But social media, if you use it quickly, the way PolitiFact and factcheck.org now, and fact checkers now, at the New York Times and other major media, that is absolutely essential. The speed of combating a bad virus, so to speak, is essential now, and the social media is a means to do that, but it hasn't yet been used to its fullest in the positive sense, while it's just with the, as you say, the difference between Vince Foster and the things that are happening now are social media driven.
Right, because you felt compelled as our editor to hire a new full-time.
No, that's right.
Right?
I thought not only did I feel compelled to, it's funny, in the era I grew up in journalism, if a bad story got out, you ignored it. In fact, you thought, and you alluded to this, you thought that if you wrote about it, we did not write about the allegations that Vince Foster was murdered. We just thought if the New York Times wrote about that and put it on its front page, some people would believe it, and it would give credibility to an obvious lie. I think if that happened now, we would feel compelled to knock it down right away. We would feel compelled to take it apart right away. But I also think, by the way, that I keep mentioning Fox because I think Fox has done some things that are bad for the media and the credibility of the media, and elevating those kinds of stories is one of them.
Right, because Sean Hannity will now do a segment.
Oh, Sean Hannity would have done a 12-part series on Vince Foster at this point.
Right, and previously the political operatives had to buy dirty money ads to get these out there. Now it's on primetime TV. Right. But I can't imagine, since I did attend college, I can't imagine what this is doing on campuses, because what we're sort of dancing around here is this relativism, that there is no truth, right? Whose truth is most important, and are facts real, which does feel a little bit new to me, that's the sort of extreme we're at. So is it an issue on campus where students are really ready to believe anything as fantastical as it is because they already have open minds?
No, I actually think relativism has been with us a long, long time. It's the same, it's the same phenomenon. It just spreads more quickly with social media. Our students are pretty darn engaged in wanting to combat, falsehoods, and it's the difference between what you believe theoretically and what you believe when you're confronted with blatant falsehoods. So climate change, for example, vaccines and autism, and it spans the political spectrum, although we have to confront the fact that there is an asymmetry in the distrust of news media between the left and the right, even though what is symmetrical is the great segmentation of our publics. But our students are eager to figure out ways of being engaged in combating falsehoods, and not to be confused with the belief that facts and evidence are subject to interpretation and debate, and that's what we have to keep open. It would be all too easy if it were just, there are the facts and there are the truths, and we just have to be great champions of the truth. We do have to be champions of truths, but our students also want to debate issues that are open to interpretation and haven't been exposed.
Right, but on the other side, though, and I think there will be a lot of discussion about this over the next couple of days here. What do you say to those that college campuses seem closed-minded from the left, that they don't want to hear the kind of more controversial voices, or do you have a racist on your campus, and should he or she be heard? And how's Penn been dealing with that?
Which is the same criticism that's leveled at the news media,
Right.
by the way.
So we have an open expression policy, and we have a long-standing statement about open expression, born of controversy a long time ago, where open expression was asserted against real threats on campus. So we have open expression policy, we have open expression observers who are trained in the case of people coming to campus who have unpopular views, and there's a real pride on campus in that culture, at the same time as there is not any desire to admit students according to their political views in order to get a balance. There is a real desire to do outreach and to underserved communities, and that's something that's really important because we live in silos. So open expression is alive and well at Penn. It is definitely a challenge at university campuses. And it's a challenge we have to really stand fervently up to, just fervently up to. And by the way, it is not in contrast to being inclusive and welcoming to minorities, of whether they're ideological minorities or racial minorities or ethnic or socioeconomic minorities. We have to do both, and that's a challenge.
Right. Sometimes I think the crisis is not a crisis of truth. Sometimes I think it's a crisis of sort of honest inquiry. I think that I get tons of critical emails from the left and the right daily. And sometimes I think that the inability of either side to understand each other or speak to each other is because there is just a complete closed-mindedness. I'm not talking about, racism or out and out evil. I'm talking about debating the larger issues of the day. I'm talking about, whether it's what trade policy should look like, or even, the broader, more existential philosophical issues. I think that people don't want to hear it. They don't want to have, I don't want to be too blanket, but we hired at the New York Times, and I run the news report and not the opinion report.
Not responsible for Bret Stevens.
But I have defended it. The editorial page hired Bret Stevens, who's a brilliant editorial columnist for the Wall Street Journal, who's to the right of our editorial page on many things, but climate change is the most. And I've read his work. and again, I didn't hire him, but I don't think Bret is a climate change denier. I think what Bret is someone who wants to challenge the notion that any challenges to what people should do in the name of climate change are verboten, that you just shouldn't have the discussions. And the outcry against the hiring of Bret Stevens, whereas my view is, who but a news organization should surface thoughtful, honest discourse? James Bennett, the editorial page editor, did not hire the leader of the Klan. He hired a guy who is much more conservative on the issue of climate change than our editorial pages. He hired somebody who makes, you don't have to agree with it, but who makes a cogent case that a lot of our readers, I think, should hear. And I think, to me, that's honest inquiry as opposed to the debate over truth.
But do you think that 10 years ago, similar situation, the reaction would have been the same? Like William Safire was a very thoughtful columnist, but in campaign years, he came home to the Republican fold, and I don't remember.
Safire was even more. Safire was not only a conservative columnist on a lefty editorial page, he had been Richard Nixon's speechwriter. And even came up with a phrase for Spiro Agnew nattering nabobs of negativism.
Guilty.
So, no, I think there's much more. I don't know if there's more of an outcry now, but people have a forum to express their anger now. So 1 million people might have been really upset and went nuts when the New York Times hired William Safire. They didn't have a way to express it. They didn't have any other place to go. You lived in New York, you read the New York Times, or you read one of the tabs. And if you read the Washington Post and you lived in New York, you got it a day late, probably, in terms of the mail. So people didn't have a choice. Now they have a choice, and they have a place to just go nuts about it, and they do.
Well, the other phenomenon is that people much more live in ideological media bubbles, which are non-intersecting now. The amount of distrust according to Gallup surveys, in every major institution that they survey, 14 major institutions, whether it's religious or media or Congress or banks, or they don't have a survey, alas, of universities, but I have no doubt that trust in us has gone down as well. It's gone down dramatically, and in just the past decade, it's gone down dramatically. And the most troubling of all is the distrust among the American public has rapidly declined. From when I graduated college, about half people said they distrusted people on the other side. It's now like 80% of Americans feel in the past, last year, 80% of Americans said they did not have a common factual agreement with the other side.
And how does that evidence itself on your campus? Because again, that's talk about the ultimate bubble, right? And you probably get to see this in a petri dish sort of fashion, right?
Yeah, well, the most evidence for it is how important and how it is for us to actually engage in dialogue across divides. And so we have what we call a campaign for community on our campus, which we invite faculty and students and staff to have uncomfortable conversations. It's actually a term that one of our deans, John Jackson Jr., came up with, the uncomfortable conversations that are needed. Now, I could imagine that, decades ago, you would never have that, but not because a lot of uncomfortable conversations were being had. Right. They weren't. It was just because the way people had a more common factual basis, and we weren't as hyperpolarized as we are now. This is an American and a global phenomenon. And I would add one other thing about it, the trend, which it's really important that for all of the openness that we are fervently committed to, both the New York Times and Penn and higher education and responsible journalism. The trend, the most common phenomenon among journalists that was not good was the balanced story, that every story had to have two sides.
Yeah.
And it was parodied in 2004 by senior correspondent in the field, Rob Corddry, in the Swift boat controversy, who said, you know, it is not my job to stand between my listening to the people and my telling the people what they've said. And, you know, Jon Stewart said, yes, it is your job. That's precisely your job. That was the precursor to fake news. And I think one of the positive phenomena that's come out of really attacking fake news, and it should be attacked, is I don't think we'll go back to that those fake balanced stories anymore.
Right, but we've been criticized in that same vein now from the right, and I wrote a column that is constantly brought up, which I stand by, of course, that said we got rid of balance, right? So Dean, which I don't think we did, but Dean, from your standpoint, you do have to worry a little bit, right, about not having false balance, but not getting too far the other way, where you're going to alienate a Trump supporter who you're trying to reach with our journalism.
No, I actually think it's funny, in editing the paper, I don't think a whole lot about, in thinking about particular stories, alienating people. Because I think that's a sort of dangerous position to put yourself in. I'm not saying that I wantonly go, let's see who I can piss off today. I don't mean that, but I think that I think there's a difference between balanced inquiry and false balance. Balanced inquiry is making sure you get the entirety of the story, going into a story with an open mind to the possibility you were wrong. And if the people who disagree with the premise of the story are thoughtful about it, including their voices. I think to me, that's the essence of journalism.
Right.
False balance is throwing in the 3 paragraphs that say, but some say, and you know in your heart it's sort of bullshit.
Right.
And I do think that journalists historically have been in the habit of doing that. I think that started to erode, by the way, during Vietnam, but it sort of held on tight. I do think it's probably gone for good. I hope so.
Right, it's like in that famous Access Hollywood tape, there was no but on the other hand.
On the other hand, what he said could be construed as not a bad thing.
That was an easy call, right? But it's not, these aren't all easy calls. But one thing about, so in terms of,
can I say one? I'm sorry.
You're the boss, you can say whatever you want.
I mean, here, just to use.
I'll have to remember that.
You're the boss too.
It doesn't happen in universities like that, does it?
It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen in
here
here
either. It doesn't happen here either. What are you doing to me?
Think of a faculty
I'm
member
cutting
who's
off your
ever said
question
that
for
to
that.
me.
I've lost some pride on that one.
I do think that we did an instance in which I think the opposite is dangerous. I do think sometimes when the press covered complex issues like trade and NAFTA, I do think that wasn't. I wouldn't call it false balance. I think we were so, and this is where the criticism of us as elite comes from, and it's probably true. I do think we didn't necessarily grapple with the impact that some of those issues, that complicated issues like trade, would have on the broader society. And I don't think it would have been false balance to have gone out and said, okay, even though every economist I have talked to says that this trade policy is a good thing for the overall economy, I do want to make sure I get the voices of people who will be hurt by it, because people will be hurt by it. That to me is, I wouldn't call it balance. I would call that sort of honest inquiry. I want to make sure, and one of the reasons people were so angry at the press in the last election is I think people thought we didn't explain that or consider it as a possibility. We just said, look, get it. Trade with China is good. Don't you get it? I have 10 Nobel Prize winners, I'm quoting in my story tomorrow, who say more trade with China is good. Are you some kind of an idiot? I'm caricaturing our attitude, but not too much. I think we should have at least understood that there are people who didn't see it that way and whose lives would have been affected by it.
Yeah, I think there's something really profound about following that line of inquiry, which is it is not enough for us, and I'll talk about universities and journalism here, it's not enough for us just to address the problem of fake news and false balance and so on. It's really important to diagnose the problem. This problem of hyperpolarization, this problem of people wanting to believe falsehoods has deep roots. And it has deep roots in economic segmentation, of growing inequalities, growing residential segregation, growing educational segregation, a big divide between the haves and the have-nots in lots of sectors. And people, we in universities need to, and we do, but we need to double down and support the kind of research into why people want to believe falsehoods. What are the antidotes to confirmation bias? We all have, and Phil Tetlock at Penn has really shown through research that it's not enough to tell people you believe something that's false, and here are the reasons, the 20 reasons why. People have to want to debias themselves, and in order to want that, you have to believe something good is at stake for you. That by by agreeing that there's man-made climate change, or agreeing that NAFTA, these are the facts about NAFTA, that you're not going to just be left, government isn't going to take over your lives in negative ways. So I think there's a lot of diagnostic work to be done, and in-depth reporting, investigative reporting is more important than ever. And for universities, are supporting the, neuroscience research, the psychological research, the political science research that really gets to causes and then antidotes and speaking publicly about them. I think there's never been a more important time for journalism and education in that area.
And if your neuroscience people want some test cases, we got a whole building filled.
Right.
This might be a good, well, we're running out of time, sorry, and I want to get to some questions. So I think this would be, even though I could keep going here, it's a good time to break. And Adam is the man with the questions.
Sure, we're getting a lot of questions from the audience at Facebook Live. The first one is for Dean. Is there such a thing as unbiased journalism? When in fact we are all humans with opinions, experiences, etc., including your reporters?
I hate the even notion of unbiased journalism. If you literally take the words, of course there's no such thing as unbiased journalism. I think that there's fair journalism, and I keep using the phrase, I use it again, honest inquiry. Of course a reporter who, I grew up in the South, and I have views about the South that are different than the views I had when I lived in California. Here's what I think. I think good journalists are open-minded and listen. I think they put the worst of their biases in their pockets, and I think their editors help them get rid of the rest of them.
Right, that's great. We also have some questions just really related sort of to crystal ball. 5-10 years from now, are we still going to be having this discussion? Is the bubbles that we live in with our Facebook news feeds, are they going to get worse? What is this conversation going to sound like 5-10 years from now? Let's start with Amy.
So
that's the easy one. You go ahead.
Oh, right. So we will still have conversations about ideological bubbles and fake news. There was yellow journalism as long as there's been journalism. There have all major institutions, whether it's business or universities, skew one way or the other on political spectrums, and we have to do our best to correct for that. What I think will be radically different, judging from history, is what are the big, dangerous falsehoods we're arguing about. Just think about the scare over HIV and all the misinformation about it and all of the prejudice against, LGBTQ the language wasn't even there in everybody's lifetime. That has been countered. So what we will see is that in many places the truth will out, and many discriminations will fade. But as I said, we're not in the post-racial, we're not going to ever be in the post-racial era or the end of history, or there will never be a time when some people aren't taken in by falsehoods. So we'll still be having conversations like this. We'll just make progress on what truths are accepted. And there are truths that are accepted. We should still be debating them to make sure we keep them alive.
Right. Dean?
You know, I was sometimes when yes, we will be having this debate. We probably could have had the debate, 50 years ago. I actually think that the world of social media has not introduced new stuff into the society. I think it's given a place for stuff to rise. I think everything we're talking about has existed in some form or another forever. I think the fact that we're being forced to have the debate, even though I think, obviously I think false news is a terrible thing, the fact that we're being forced to have the debate is good and healthy for the society.
The fact that we can have the debate
Right.
speaks volumes about our society, and we should never take that for granted. Just have to look around the world to see the opposite of having that debate. So may the debate rage and we'll make progress, but we'll still have plenty to debate 5, 10, 100 years from now.
Works for us. It's good for our business.
Right.
Good for ours too, but it's mainly good for democracy and society.
Right. Lots of questions from the audience. I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly. From Linda Ubre in the audience. How should we as higher ed leaders manage the tension between free expression and potential hate speech? This question is for you, Amy.
We should defend free expression and not shut down offensive, hateful speech. We should also use our voices to counter hateful, offensive speech. Free expression alone is not enough. Free expression is necessary, but it isn't sufficient. It is necessary, so I'm not qualifying its necessity, but I am qualifying that it is not the panacea to really to what its value is. And its value is to encourage, allow everybody to speak up and denounce, including peaceful demonstrations against terrible speech. And that's something I think we can be very proud of. I am encouraged by the peaceful activism of our students. I am not encouraged when I see speakers being shouted down or forced to withdraw from campuses. And we will, at Penn and I think at many universities, stand up against that kind of shutting down and also stand up and speak out, including speaking out against powerful political people who put out policies that would be against our core mission, like the executive order to ban immigrants from 7 countries. We took a very strong stand against that.
Okay. And this next question, anonymous from the audience, could take us through breakfast tomorrow, but I'm going to finish with 60 seconds from each of you. Could you reflect on what you think are the causes of the hyperpolarization that threatens our pursuit of balanced inquiry? What's causing the polarization?
Well, I don't think it, I think the country's been polarized for a very, very long time. I think that we're seeing, I think social media has given an expression for the polarization. Yes, I think that people tend to live with other people like them, but I actually think this anger and the polarization has been around for a long time. I think that people have many, many, many more ways to express it.
So I agree that people have more ways to express it. It also, there's overwhelming evidence that our politics is more hyperpolarized than it's been in the, it's increasingly more and more hyperpolarized. And I think some of the causes of that are the segmentation of our publics, economically, residentially, and and social media contributes to that. So here's the big difference in the media landscape, which we alluded to earlier, but let me just put a, not to put a fine point on it. In the days of, which is historically of yellow journalism, there were segmented publics, but today, since people are immersed, their lives are immersed in social media, Facebook's algorithms tell 1 billion people around the world what they want to read, listen to, and so on. And that feeds hyperpolarization. So it's overdetermined today.
Great. Back to you.
All right, we have the red light, so that was perfectly
No,
timed.
you have to answer that question.
Oh, I have
yes.
to answer that question? I mean, we did have a civil war, right? So, imagine if we had Facebook then. So to your point, it's not new. I do think that social media put it and has made it so much worse, and it makes all of our jobs that much more important.
Yeah.
Well, another thing that the Civil War points out is there are worse things in the world than hyperpolarization,
Yeah.
right?
Way worse. So on that note,
Thank you.
thanks so much.
Thank you all.
Thanks.
Thank you. Hey, Jim, thank you. Thank you, Dean.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome New York Times op-ed columnist Frank Bruni and his guest, Gina Raimondo.
Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for being here. I feel a little out of last couple times we've talked, it's been over big plates of Italian food in Providence.
Yeah.
So I feel like I should have brought some eggplant
You should
parmesan
have,
out
or at least
something.
a bottle of red wine. I
Yeah,
mean,
I'm
really,
sorry.
Frank.
I'm sorry about that. But so we're not going to talk about food. We're going to talk about the Rhode Island Promise. You have come up with a free tuition proposal for Rhode Island that you're now trying to put through the legislature. For people who aren't totally up to speed on that, can you give us the short version of what that proposal is and how it differs in key ways from, say, what Bernie Sanders was proposing and what Governor Andrew Cuomo has proposed?
Yes, I'm happy to. And it's wonderful to be here with you and great to be with you, Frank. So the proposal is called Rhode Island Promise. I proposed it this year. It is a last dollar scholarship to provide 2 years of tuition-free college for every Rhode Island high school graduate at one of our institutions of public higher ed. So in Rhode Island, New Yorkers here will find this hard to believe. We have one community college. You're already laughing. We have one community college called the Community College of Rhode Island. We have our land-grant research university, URI, and then we have a 4-year degree granting institution, RIC, Rhode Island College. So what we've said is, if you're eligible for in-state tuition, you're a Rhode Island resident, you apply for all your financial aid and receive what you're eligible for. You have to go full-time. We'll either pick up your 2-year associate's degree at the community college or the last 2 years of a 4-year degree. Mm-hmm. And that's a little bit of a twist. It's an idea, in fact, that came from our college presidents because they said, look, plenty of students start, the problem isn't starting, it's finishing.
Right.
So provide, or as my kids say, they can get the chocolate after they eat the broccoli and chicken. So the second 2 years are on us. You got to get yourself through the first 2 years. As I understand the New York program, some of the key differences, obviously it's 2 years, not 4. It's that second 2 years. Probably the biggest difference is the proposal as I've presented is not means tested.
Right.
And, we can argue about that. We can talk about that.
Well, why did you decide to go down that
Right.
fork in the road?
So I feel this is, it's like a public education. When I was a kid, and when you were a kid, not that long ago.
Oh, well, long ago.
No, not that long ago. There was no full day kindergarten. It really didn't exist. There was no full day K. There was no public pre-K. Now we know that that is part of an essential education, and we provide that. I feel the same way is 99% of good jobs that are being created, that have been created in this country since the recession, require a degree past high school. And so how can you say, in order to get a good job, you need a degree past high school, but oh, by the way, it's unaffordable? So I think those 2 years ought to be, as a matter of right, part of our public education promise to every kid in Rhode Island. The other difference between our program and what I know about Excelsior is we don't require a residency requirement post-graduation.
Yes, and New York does, yeah.
And New York does.
Yeah.
Why did we do that? As I said before, I think this is an essential education to get a job. The other reason is, having run a government for 2.5 years now, it's really hard to execute well. And so I wanted the simplest, easiest to administer, easiest to implement program, so we got it right. And the way we're proposing this, the colleges provide the scholarship, and we don't have to be tracking people down and spending money on a bureaucracy to track people down to figure out if they are going to stay in Rhode Island.
Just to push back for a second, though.
Yes.
It means that if tomorrow's Donald Trump, and I ask the question this way because there's a new law in America, you can't let 10 minutes go by without saying Donald Trump's name. If tomorrow's Donald Trump raised tomorrow's Ivanka in Rhode Island, she would be able to go to college there 2 years for free, even with all that money. Is that right?
Yes, in the same way that she could go to any one of our public high schools. And by the way, it wouldn't be the worst thing if we had more, I'm not wading into the Trump situation. I'm just saying.
I was going to say the worst, it wouldn't be the worst to have many more
sorry.
Donald Trumps in the future.
Point of it is.
I thought you were a Democrat.
You want, now, you said we weren't going to be political.
Oh, no, sorry.
See, now you're violating the rules. Point being, it is a good thing. I sent my kids to public school. It is a good thing to have all kinds of people of all kinds of economic spectrums at our public institutions. And so, yes. Now, let me also tell you the reality, because I ran the numbers on this. We thought about means testing it, and the legislature may require that in order to get it passed, because there's it's a budgetary reality, and I'm practical, and I appreciate that. There are actually very, very, very few students who come from upper income who go to one of our institutions of public education. So you have to realize that. Here's the reality. Let's say your mom's a school teacher and your dad is a firefighter, or you have a double nurse family. You are solidly making 6 figures. Let's say you together make $125,000 a year. That is middle class. That is not poor. And let's say you have 2 or 3 kids. College is out of reach. And those kids need and deserve an education to get a good job. So that's the other reason I didn't want to means test it. I didn't want to leave behind the average Rhode Island family.
You got some titters in the audience when you mentioned that you have all of 3 public colleges and universities in Rhode Island. Is this plan upsizable to a state with a much larger population and dozens of public institutions?
I think so. Look, every state has their own challenges and may require slightly different programs. The other thing about Rhode Island is you can pretty much get anywhere in 45 minutes. So we're not covering room and board. And the reality is you can commute anywhere. So I think the concept of breaking down the barriers so folks can get the education and job training that they need to get a good job through a scholarship program is a concept that any state could apply. And then, changing it to fit, like in Tennessee, for example, they have a big network of community colleges and technical colleges. We don't. So they limited their program to those community colleges. I think that, that could make sense considering Tennessee.
I understand as you were putting this together and figuring out how you were going to talk about it, you really struggled with the word free.
Yes,
Why?
I did. I did struggle with the word free. And I was ultimately convinced to go for that because, to capture people's attention. Well,
Why
a couple
did you
reasons.
not want, why were you worried?
Right,
about
a couple reasons. One, it isn't really free. I mean, the reality is, if you want a 4-year degree, we're only paying the tuition portion for 2 years. There's books, there's fees, there's living expenses. Most students will still have to work. So it isn't actually free. And I mean, I think that's sort of the main reason. I didn't want to be, misleading about the program. And also you have to apply for all your financial aid and your Pell Grant and whatnot. So that's why I was apprehensive.
You mentioned Pell Grants. Pell Grants you can take with you to a public or private institution.
Yeah.
As you put this together, was there much discussion about whether you should come up with something that would also provide money for those students who wanted to go to a private institution?
We had a little bit of discussion. In general, I tend away from voucher programs, which is what that would be. Here's the reality. This program, as I've proposed it, is a very small expenditure on behalf of Rhode Island. It's like less than 1% of our total budget. We're still in a budget deficit. My question as governor is, how can I spend a little and get a big impact? And this way, you can get, I think, a big impact. The graduation rate at Rhode Island College and CCRI and URI, I believe, will rise substantially, and we'll be able to have the biggest impact on our students. It's also supportive of public education, taxpayer dollars to go to support our public institutions. If we had provided a voucher program, each student would have gotten a much smaller scholarship and would have had a more diffuse impact for the same amount of money.
Should private institutions feel threatened by this kind of plan? And if not, why shouldn't they feel threatened by it?
I don't think they should, though I've heard from a few that don't love it.
And what do they say to you?
We're blessed in Rhode Island with, we have Brown and RISD and Providence College and Johnson & Wales. We have Salve Regina, and they're all terrific, and we're lucky to have them. Most of the students who go to those places are from out of state. What they say to us is it's going to take students away from us. And my response to that is a fewfold. We have to act. So the answer is we don't know precisely how this will affect private institutions at scale, long term, if this were to happen in 50 states. And we will, deal with that as we go. You can't use that as an excuse not to act. Too many students are being denied an opportunity to get a good job because they can't afford college. It's a crisis in this country. It's locking people out of economic opportunity, and we have to take action. Will say that if over time this puts pressure on private institutions to bring down the cost or to be more innovative, to figure out ways to provide a more affordable college education, that would be a wonderful societal benefit, I think.
Do you worry at all, because I've heard this concern expressed too, that it will increase applications to the public schools so greatly, they'll become more selective than you necessarily want them to be, and they in fact will no longer be open to some of the students you're actually trying to help?
Yeah. So again, I think if you look at places like Tennessee that have been doing this for a couple of years, that isn't the experience. I think more like, you will probably see a bump, and I think when we modeled for the budgetary numbers, I think we considered a bump of about 20%, just to make sure we were funding it adequately. I think more likely, you're just going to see more people finishing. You know how many people I see, Frank, on a weekly basis who are waitressing, and why are they waitressing when they want to be a nurse? Because they dropped out of Rhode Island College. They have a bundle of loans, no degree, and they're waitressing, and they want to be a nurse. They deserve to get the job they want, to be making a decent income. I was with a woman the other day. She works 2 minimum wage jobs as a CNA. She said, Governor, you've got to get this passed. She works 60 hours a week. She is poor. She has half of a degree, and she has a lot of loans. So more likely, you're going to see these people picking up their degree, getting a better job, and not be burdened with debt, which is good for them and good for the economy.
As I was looking around at the reactions to what you proposed, one of the ones that surprised me, one of the criticisms that surprised me, was people saying this actually, it's a lot of money to benefit only a small portion of the population. I think they meant not only that not everybody goes to college, but anyone over a certain age who's past college. How do you respond to that, and how, whether it's education or whether it's something else as a governor, how do you get people to care about things that might be for the public good that aren't going to actually help them individually in the immediate future?
I've been surprised by that reaction, though it's been very common. You know, I had to pay for my kids or myself. So it's a challenge. Here's what I'd say about that. This is about jobs. Why am I doing this? Because I've spent 2 years as governor talking to companies saying, what's it going to take for you to add jobs in Rhode Island? What would it take for you to move to Rhode Island? And the top answer is skilled workforce. So this is about making sure Rhode Islanders get the jobs we're creating. And every Rhode Islander has the job training and education they need to get a good job. And if we do that, then the economy is going to be better for everybody and everybody wins. And if we don't do that, then our economy won't be strong and everybody loses. So I think it's the right thing to do. But if you don't agree with me, the fact of the matter is this is all about economic growth, economic development. The states that are going to be successful are the ones that have a talent supply. And then the pie grows for everybody. And then your piece of the pie grows. You know, this is about long-term economic development that benefits everyone.
Are we, in terms of our political obsessions of the moment, are we talking so much about about making college accessible, getting completion rates up, that we're forgetting to talk about getting kids to college in shape to actually do the work? I mean, I'm sure there are a lot of college administrators and presidents in this room who worry about the quality of the people who are walking onto campus. Are we taking our eye off the ball there?
We can't, but we have to do both. You know, we have to chew gum and walk at the same time. So in Rhode Island, I'm happy to say, we have a good tradition of investing in K through 12. We are top 10 in the country in what we invest in our K through 12 system. Doesn't mean the results are where they need to be, and we have to not take our eye off the ball. Unfortunately, we're closer to the bottom on what we invest in our institutions of public higher ed. So that's another reason I'm for this. This is about supporting public higher education. It's not the only thing we're doing. You know, we are improving remedial education at our community college. We are, improving the way we teach in high schools. So, not to go into all the details, you have to do both. But I don't think we have the luxury of saying, well, we're just going to work on K through 12 until that's perfect, and then we're going to focus on higher ed. Because the economy is changing too fast. This is about making sure our young people are ready for jobs and ready for the jobs of the future and the economy of the future. I mean, we know people are worried about their economic stability. There's a good reason for that. That's not irrational. If you don't have some degree past high school, your economic prospects aren't very good. And so I think we got to face that reality and help folks get the skills they need to get jobs.
Because it's part of this larger national debate, your free tuition proposal has gotten the lion's share of media attention. You've done some other things in Rhode Island, though, that I find very interesting that I wish you'd talk about in terms of kids beginning college already with part of the work done. Can you talk about what you've done in that regard?
Yes. So I started a program my first year as governor called Prepare RI, where we allow every high school student to take college classes for college credit for free. And this, I think...
At a public institution.
At a public high school, I'm sorry, at public high schools. But so prior to when I became governor, you could take college classes for college credit, but it was about $200 a class. Now that may not sound like that much.
That's a lot.
To you, but $200 might as well be $20,000 for a lot of kids in our public high schools. So we said, you know what, let's break down the barriers. Not $200, it's free. The number of students taking the college classes for college credit through the roof. Small investment, huge impact. We have thousands and thousands of students getting a year of college under their belt in high school. So the Rhode Island Promise program is just kind of a natural next extension. And you could imagine, maybe you take a year of college courses in high school, then you go to URI and you can get a college degree in 3 years and we'll pay for 2. It just unlocks huge opportunities for people.
Is there good research on whether that would, do we know that that would boost completion rates?
We do know that the most common reason people drop out is affordability. And we do know when you reduce that barrier, people are much more likely to graduate. We do know that.
You've also done something with college boards and assistance there, right? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so we've made it free for, this was the first year, every kid in high school, I don't know if this made me popular with teenagers, but every kid in high school had the SAT administered to them for free during class time. Why did we do that? Not everyone can afford the money to take the test. Not everyone would even think about taking the test. No one in their family ever did that before. Not everyone could get a ride on a Saturday to go to the school to take the test. So reducing the barriers, same thing, phenomenal results. As I spend time with people in Rhode Island, it's constantly moving to me and amazing to me how many people there are who are unbelievably talented, smart, hardworking. They just want a chance. Like someone gave you a chance. Someone gave me a chance. My dad went to college on a GI Bill. All his brothers were butchers. One guy, he got his ticket to the middle class. So many high school kids, they just give me a chance. And for them, that chance, the difference between a life of poverty and a life of opportunity could be $1,000, $2,000. And I think it's worth making the investment.
The SAT, the free SAT, that seems like such a restrained and reasonable investment. Are other states doing that?
I think some are, but I'm not sure how many.
But not a majority at all?
No, not a majority at all. And again, when you're governor of a cash-strapped state, you're always trying to look for small investments, big impact. We know that students who take the SAT are much more likely to, just think about college as an option, which is a good thing. And that's why also we wanted to do it during class time.
I want to ask you one more question, then I want to throw it open to people here. As we talk more and more about completion rates, about getting kids to college, and turn it into this almost thing to get to the finish line of, is there any danger that that we will take our eye off quality and that we'll turn college into a much different kind of experience that maybe actually isn't all it's supposed to be?
So my hope is that we would actually go the other way, which is to say, if we focus even more on the fact that you need skills and education to get a good job, we will double down on our efforts to make college more relevant. So and we're trying hard to do that in Rhode Island. We have new president of our community college and Rhode Island College, and that's what we're doing. We're making it easier to get the class, make it easier to schedule so you can get the classes you need when you need them, easier to go to school in the summer, easier to do online classes, and really making sure we're teaching classes that are relevant for jobs that are available now. And again, if this whole Promise program is about equipping folks with skills to get good jobs, I'm hoping that puts into the system a mentality of, we gotta get people to graduate. Half a college degree is not valuable. This is about completing with a degree with relevant skills to get a good job. I also think there's huge benefits to the K through 12 system, because if every kid knows there's a spot for them in college, regardless of whether they're rich or poor, I think they're going to work harder and be more motivated and more goal-oriented. A lot of kids give up because they figure, why bother? I can't go, I can't afford it. But if they know there's a spot for them if they hustle in high school, I think it will help performance in K through 12.
So while we've been talking, people have been submitting, emailing questions, and Adam, you're going to ask some of those, right?
Sure. First one from an anonymous person in the audience. Will you please run for president?
That's very kind. I have a lot of wood to chop in Rhode Island.
This question from Michael Petullo at Columbia Law School. Are college affordability programs like these just substituting for declining state appropriations to public institutions of higher ed, which has been a trend for decades?
So it's an unfortunate trend, and one that I have started to turn the tide on in Rhode Island since becoming governor. Each year I've put in budgets that provide more funding for higher ed, and I hope to be able to continue to do that because it's an investment worth making, and I think we ignore that to our peril. It's a shame to see, for instance, what's happened at UC California system. So no, but this is a way to continue to support our institutions of public higher ed, and also, as I say, breaks down barriers for young people who deserve a chance.
Okay. This question from Douglas Harrison at University of Maryland. Given the large number of adult learners whose pathway through higher ed typically does not include a full-time college experience, why limit free college to full-time students?
Yes, that is a terrific question. And the answer is you have to start somewhere, but we need to do a lot more to help adult learners, and I will continue to work on that. There are so many people in Rhode Island who are adult, mid-career, some of the people I just talked about, stuck in jobs where they don't make much money, they're working hard, and the only way they're going to unlock their earning potential is to go back to school. And we need to do more for that, and we're going to continue to do that.
Okay, a few more questions I want to get through. Would you prefer to see the federal government offer free education, or is this a job for the states?
I would love to see the federal government do its job, but in the absence of them doing their job, I'm going to do mine. It's absolutely, the United States government, it is so upsetting to see the lack of funding and to see funding cut, and I hope that changes. But again, in the meantime, we have thousands of Rhode Islanders who are looking to us for action, and we are doing what we need to do.
Okay. Is Rhode Island considering funding apprenticeship programs? This is a priority of many business leaders.
Yes. I should have said this earlier. We have done an awful lot as it relates to expanding apprenticeship programs, expanding our career and technical education programs in our high schools. Not everyone should go to college. And when I talk to students in high school, I say to them, promise me you will do something past high school. You want to go into the military? Great. You want to do an apprenticeship program? Great. You want to go to college, 2-year or 4-year? Great. But you got to promise me you're going to go get some degree or credential past high school, because I know that's what you need to get a job and realize your potential. So we have, by no means is this a substitute for investments in apprenticeships, job training programs, career and technical education. The reality is it's a brutal place to be in the American economy if you don't have some degree or credential past high school. And so I want to make as many options as possible available to people so everybody has a shot. Mm-hmm. And since I've been governor, we've been really lucky to create a lot of jobs. We've created, this won't sound like much to you, but 12,000, 13,000 jobs. It's a lot. Our unemployment rate has dropped dramatically. I have to make sure Rhode Islanders are getting these jobs. I've announced 17 new companies coming to Rhode Island. I need the people of Rhode Island getting these good jobs we're creating. Mm-hmm. And that's what this is all about.
Okay. Another question. If you were to argue against your own program, to criticize your own program.
Why would I do that? I need to get this passed in the legislature.
Right. If you were to create a stunt double who did that, what would be the most valid criticisms that you've had to work through, fend off, et cetera?
First, let me say, as I said the other day, I want the legislature to pass this. This is about jobs. A vote for it is a vote for jobs. Having said that, I'm open to compromise. So I don't think it should be means tested for all the reasons I said. But if we have to go that way in light of budget realities, I'm open to that. I'm open to the budgetary realities that there are. Quite frankly, I think the criticism is it should be more. It should be what you just said. It should be adult education. It should be people who are mid-career. What are we doing about adult ed? How come it's only 2 years and not 4 years? How come it's not for students who are in college right now and just starting with the soon to be in college? And you know, we've tried to say you got to start somewhere and live within our means and just get the program off the ground.
Okay, great. That's wonderful. Frank, any last comments, questions from you?
No, I'm just so thankful you spent the time with us.
Thank you.
I'm sorry it wasn't over Italian food, as I said
Next time.
before, but I think there are drinks awaiting anybody who's thirsty. So
Frank called me a year or so ago and he said, Gina, I want to come to Rhode Island and you pick a restaurant. The stress of having the former New York Times food critic who's Italian, having you pick the restaurant, but we did okay, right? It was
and
fun.
I will always remember something you said to me. I think we did this twice.
Yeah.
So you've had to pick twice. You were talking about your career in rugby in school.
Right, right.
But I think you were also talking about your career in politics, and you said at 5'3", it's good to be little and fast. So thank you, little, fast Governor of Rhode Island, for your time with us.
Thanks again. Thanks again to Governor Raimondo and Frank Bruni. Drinks are outside, and we will see you again at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning for breakfast. And again, thank you for coming.